Hello guys, in this video I'm going to talk through how I use the camera raw filter in Photoshop. Let's jump straight into it. So we're going to edit two photos. We got this first photo of Kylian Mbappe. We're going to convert the layer to a smart object just so that we can go back and alter the camera raw filter if we need to. So let's open camera raw filter. Okay. So in the first tab, basic, there's a few alterations that I usually make. I normally bring the contrast down to say minus, depending on the quality of the image, I normally bring it down to about -50 and then the highlights to -30. This will just allow us to, alter the shadows and the whites much easier, and it becomes more clear. So we're going to bring the shadows down just to bring the lightness up a bit. And then we're going to increase the whites and decrease the black slightly. So if we look at it before and after, perhaps bring the blacks down just a slightly bit. The reason we reduce the contrast and the highlights, it's mainly a photo editing technique. It's just so that you can access more of the lights and more of the darks without the contrast affecting it too much. So we're going to increase the texture now by say +30. And let's just have a look at it before and after on that one as well. You don't want to increase the texture too much, because as you go further down the line, you can see that it starts bringing some green and purple areas in where the texture is a bit too much. So we're going to leave it at about 30, especially if further down the line in your design you want to add camera raw to the overall feel to the project. Then it's going to add on top of what you've already added camera raw to. And clarity, I tend to not use this too high, again, because if you're putting this image into a design that at the end you're going to merge all the layers together and add another camera raw filter at the end, it's going to double the amount of clarity that you're going to put on it. So we're going to do about 20 on this one. And then I'm going to bring the vibrance up to 20, and then I'm going to take the saturation down to 20. Just to balance it out. Because we've added so much clarity to it, it kind of brings the colours up as well. So we're just balancing that with vibrance and saturation. So let's look at it before and after again. So the next tab that I usually use is detail. And if you hold Alt down and drag, it changes it to the black and white. This makes it easier for us to see what areas are being affected, without the colour throwing your eye off. We're going to do the same with the radius. Holding Alt and dragging allows you to see what areas are being affected. We're going to leave the detail around in the middle, and same with masking. Now this is where it acts as the same as what you would use a clipping mask. So the darker areas are obviously the areas that aren't going to be affected. So the light areas are the areas that we want the sharpening to happen the most. So if we leave it there and then do a before and after, we've kind of sharpened this image up pretty good so far. Color mixer is something I sometimes use when there's too much green. Like if the kit isn't green and there's like grass on the socks or whatever that are white, then I normally bring the greens all the way down, and it just gets rid of any blotches that might appear on the face as well, like around his eyebrow up here. As you can see, it's got a slight green. So I normally bring that down, and then I increase the oranges just to add a bit more light to his face. And you can move the yellows as well if you wanted a bit more brighter areas to come up. but we're going to leave that as it is. So the kit colors on your are pink and a purple color. So we're not going to alter the pinks or the purples on this one, including the reds, because if we change the reds, it's going to change the darker areas of the pink. So we're going to set that back to 0. The color grading is something I use more towards the end of my designs when I merge all the layers together, just to give it either a red or a moody color to it. So we can change the midtones here, and obviously it's affecting the majority of the image. And then if we come down to shadows, we can add a bit more purple to it, and highlights, probably leave around the red area as well. So blending is how much you want it to blend with the image. Obviously 0 doesn't really affect it too much. I normally leave it around 80%. And if we do it before and after, this is good if you have a very dark or a white background. If you wanted to add a sort of tint, sort of color to your design. And if you come to these sliders underneath each one, you can see how it affects the contrast. Obviously, if you bring it up, it kind of lifts the image a bit as well. I normally leave it in the middle unless you want to bring the shadows up. Same with the highlights. The further you go to the right, the brighter it's going to make the highlights in that color. And obviously you can bring the highlights down as well. So we're gonna leave it just below the middle because we don't want it to be too bright. And balance then, so you can switch it up by saying I want more shadows or I want more the highlights to show more. So in this case, we're actually going to move it towards the shadows. That's just as a personal preference for this piece. And then we go down to effects. Obviously, a lot of my pieces have a very greeny sort of feel to them. I normally set it to about 45, leave that at 25 and leave that at 50. I sometimes add some dark around the edges just to bring more attention to the center, and I bring the midpoint all the way to the middle, set the highlights all the way up and the feather, and that allows you to adjust it a bit better. So calibration is something I use quite a bit. You can alter anywhere on here where it's a red, purple or an orange color. You can alter it by moving this slider. This is good if you want to bring your colors back after doing you've gone through all your process, you've done all your color correction, and at the end you just wanted to tidy it up a bit. You can use calibration just to either bring the saturation down for those colors. So we can bring the saturation down for this. And then if we alter the green primary, it's going to affect the areas where it's mainly orange and towards green. As you can see, his face is changing. So I normally try and bring the green up. Again, that's just personal preference. And obviously if you bring the saturation down, it reduces the colors for that primary. If you bring it up, it obviously increases them back. So we're going to bring it up to about 7. Same with the blue primary. You've got your greens all the way to your light blues, and then back to your purples. So I see this is going to affect the majority of this image. So we don't want to alter it too much to take away from what the kit color is, but we're going to bring it up a bit. And then obviously the saturation does exactly the same as the other ones. It increases and decreases the saturation for the blue primary. So after I've done that, sometimes I might go back and alter my texture just to see what I can get out of it. I normally do this at the end so that you're only adding a little bit more texture on top of what you've already used Camera Raw for. So you can get more texture out of it. You can get more clarity out of it without it looking too cooked. And sometimes I might bring the dehaze back in as well. So this is a before and after. The next thing then, going from here, you'd mask him out, and then you can check him in your design then. Because I'm going to save this as a preset, I don't want it to include the grain effect. I don't want it to include any effects actually. You only want to include the grain and any other overall feel to the composition towards the end of the process. So I'm going to use this one to edit the players for such. So I'm going to turn that one off. I'm actually going to take the calibration in a bit so that it doesn't affect colors on any other player too much. And then we're going to bring the vibrance down and the saturation down slightly. And then we're going to bring the texture back to 30 and the clarity to 20, maybe 30 as well. And then what we're going to do, we're going to save this preset. So if you go to these three dots, click it, the drop down comes down, create a preset. I'm going to call this, say, sharpen for now. And go out of here. Again, still the before and after, you've really made this image stand out a lot more, ready to be cut. So we're going to do the same with this one. We're going to go camera raw filter, and we're going to apply that camera raw preset that we just saved and see what it looks like. Again, it's not a great image. I think it still looks pretty good when when it's zoomed in. The image was made bigger, so obviously it lost a lot of quality, but that still looks pretty good, to be fair. And that's just one, adding one camera raw preset to it. That's pretty much it for this camera raw tutorial. If you have any questions about anything else that you want to know about camera raw, but I think I pretty much covered it all in that tutorial there. Just give me a shout on Patreon.